Hey there, everybody. I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line. I am joined by my partner, Tori, with her beautiful pink nails, wiping dust off the cover of the book here.
I
And
think
we.
it's chocolate.
Chocolate. Oh,
Yeah.
I would never get chocolate on one of my books. They don't tell people that I
Oh
get.
yeah,
I,
my bad.
I don't. I don't put sticky notes or chocolate on my books.
No.
But welcome back to another edition of Tori Talks, and we're continuing on with our overview of the work of Katie O'Neill. And today, in the second of the two videos that we're making, we're looking at the Tea Dragon Society trilogy of books. And like everything we were saying yesterday about Katie O'Neill's stuff, it's just
Come on, I want that as wallpaper, like in my kitchen.
it's super adorable. There's consistent aesthetic between all of them, where they all basically have like this wallpaper vibe inside. That's another thing I really appreciate about her work is.
Very well designed. Who does the design? Hillary Thompson. Excellent work.
Oh, really? I would have assumed this all by Katie O'Neill. Oh, name change from Katie to Kay. Okay. So Katie O'Neill. I'm not sure, but there's a very consistent presentation across
Yeah.
everything where it's like, yeah, this is an artist who, you know what you're getting into, and I think also an artist who, when we talk about like the monster life stuff, where it's like, or that's what's that book series you like to read?
Oh, Legends and Lattes by Baldtree.
Yeah, this like super cute like fantasy
Yeah.
store having a coffee shop.
Yeah, I would love if Kay O'Neill drew that, like made a comic of that.
But I feel like this Tea Dragon Society book and Kate O'Neill's work in general must have been one of the early influences on that. I just feel like I see so much that came from this that has this vibe that is fantasy characters, kind of human-ish, but with horns and stuff. They got the piercings. There's
like hoof feet and tails and stuff, but
yeah, kind of anthropomorph. And like in this one, they own a tea shop, and she just seems to be the best of that genre.
yeah, I mean, it's every single. We could go through every page, and I could like tell you what I love about each one, but it would take a million hours. So, yeah, it's just amazing.
So, anyways, in this one, we have this trilogy. Kind of, we get introduced to the main characters. Then in the next book, we go back in time, and then we kind of take a time jump forward. So,
Yeah.
in this one, we're introduced to the main character of the book, which is Greta, and Greta's mother here, and obviously Greta is being raised like as a blacksmith in a blacksmith family.
And her little fire spirit, whose name is Brick. Oh, so cute. Oh my gosh, look at him eating a little pastry. I really liked this, how we talked about how there's no bad guys anywhere in the story. So Greta's in town shopping for groceries and comes across this little tea dragon who's being attacked by these two wolves, and she's like, hey, yelling at them and glaring, and then she pauses for a second and she goes, oh, they're starving, and she gets out this big piece of prize meat, and they're like, oh, fuck yeah, give me that, and then
Oh.
and then you see them walking away eating, and she's like, well, mom's gonna be mad, but like no one deserves to starve. And it's like, even in that situation, even though they're being the bad guy, like instead of treating them like most stories, it would have been like she would have just thrown a rock and they would have run away.
Bad dogs.
But instead she like took the time to be like, no, let's see the motivation behind that and be like, oh no, they're just hungry. So I really liked that, because that, like you had said about the Aquacorn Cove, like even in this situation where they're the bad guy, like they're not bad guys, they're just hungry.
Yeah, they have proper motivations. They're not evil. And just again, like this is a perfect example of how good she is with shape, because you just take that as an abstract. I do think that there one thing, probably partially because of my color vision, but I think sometimes some of the colors, because of the matte printing, or like there's line work separating these out, but at a glance they're just a flat black silhouette. I do think sometimes in some of these, the warm earthy colors, at least for me, get a little low on the contrast. But usually it's like this, where it's just this very rich, warm thing. But I think sometimes like this, it gets a little...
Yeah, I would agree. Sometimes it does do that. But I think for the most part, it's usually pretty manageable. But I mean, there is a lot of like monochrome.
And for me, like color ranges like this,
This
don't
is like your
stand out as much. So there's no value difference between, I'm assuming, a green here and like a reddish brown here, but they're the exact same value, and so they bleed together for me. So it's a little difficult, but I can tell that they're really like rich, luscious, jewel-like colors. It's just here it's difficult when she switches into like the oranges and the yellows and stuff. Then I find the blues, purples. I find it very rich.
That's what I want our house to look like.
we're gonna get close. We should be a few days after this recording, closing on a house. Woo! I don't know if that will be out. If we'll make another video about that before or after this comes out, but we're gonna get pretty close to that.
Something else I like about this is how in these panels where it's like just them talking or something, she'll always put in these like little flower details behind them, or like vines and things like that. I really like that. It just not only does it add to the cuteness and the prettiness, but it's just a little more visually interesting. It's not always the same thing, but yeah, how they always have. I mean, sometimes I guess they do repeat, but
I hadn't even noticed that, but that really makes a difference. So it's not just like blank everywhere.
Yeah, it just makes it feel richer.
Oh, I'm gonna steal that trick for
it's
college.
Really smart, right?
Yeah, we can use that. But anyways, here we meet her dad. We meet Greta's dad, and we also meet Hezekiel and his like tea dragon Jasmine, or Hezekiel. Hezekiel, and he is the tea maker that Greta's gonna meet. That he's gonna introduce her to the world of tea dragons.
Oh.
And you can see here we meet Minette, who is awesome character design, super cool, like unicorn deer girl.
Yeah, I don't know. She's just cute. Look at her little face, and look at little chamomile. Oh.
And then the little chamomile tea dragon, and the tea dragons all grow the like leaves and flowers off their heads and horns, and then they harvest that, and that's what they make the tea out of.
I want one so bad.
Yeah, I don't like how this is not a cartoon with a set of plushies and stuff. I don't know. Someone's missing out. And then we're introduced to Ezekiel's partner Eric, who is disabled, but is his romantic partner and shares in the business. That's the other thing that I like about this is Kay O'Neill's work is very obviously queer.
Yeah.
And it's very obviously like diversity, equity, inclusion minded type of stuff, but it's not like a lot of the books that go to that route. Like, I don't think anyone ever like explicitly says I'm gay, or like
they just are. Like, we always talk about that. It's like, I don't really want to hear people sit around talking about being that. I just enjoy seeing them existing in the world as that. Like
already pre-accepted, like they're in a world where it's not an issue. I get why people want to also talk about the experience now, but when like every book with a gay person in it is like trying to make a political message,
or if it's only about everybody knows that being a gay teenager is hard. Like it just is. I know, and like that story is relatable because so many of us go through that, but also like it's just been, like you say that all the time, it's just been told to death. Like, I would rather
and the same with
hear
like
other stories about
the same with the disabled. Like, it's really never a story about how much harder it is to be a disabled person or anything like that. They're just showing a disabled person in a healthy, loving relationship, running a private business, and like being a competent adult,
just having a life.
I
find that really refreshing.
Having good relationships with the kids, and I think this makes this a book where if you're in a family where your parents are like freaked out about being gay, you could still bring this home from school, and like there's nothing in it where that's ever explicit, but you're still having the kids getting familiar. It just seems like this, like she's got the blend of how to have that kind of representation, um and showing it, this is the world that we want, like just model the behavior you want.
Yeah, where like everyone's just cool with everyone else. It's so cute. I know. I hate it. I want to be in that world. I want everything to look like that. It's just genius. It's so good.
Yeah, the like this drawing right here,
Even
this
just her
one.
sweet little toes pointed, her little hooves. I mean, oh, you can't. You can't. Oh, you could bottle that. It's just so good. It makes me so mad. I'm like, God, I want to draw something half as good as that.
Me too.
For real. She's so smart.
And so you see that Eric and Ezekiel were part of like founding the Tea Dragon Society. Actually, I want to ask you, one of the things I found kind of odd about these books is they're kind of just wandery story wise, and like the titles oftentimes don't correlate to the biggest things in the plot necessarily. I found, like, he kind of mentions like we found each other through our tea dragons and formed the Tea Dragon Society, and then I think at the end of the book they kind of like, let's maybe form a new society, but it's not really a story about the Tea Dragon Society. And similarly, the one about the festival's not so much about the festival.
I think on this one, like, this was pretty majorly about the society. Like, the fact that it was. I mean, it takes a long time to, like, build up to that. And it does sort of, like, meander through. And you say that a lot about, like, interpersonal, like, the monster life. It's a lot about just, like, daily life and, like, interpersonal relationships as well. But in the end, it is about. And they're talking about here, like, the art is fading of taking care of these tea dragons because it takes a long time. It takes a lot of work. Like, it's really, and we talk about that a lot, like, magic being taking the time to cultivate and craft and, like, master something. And that's kind of what this is discussing here. And that's sort of what the society is all about and, like, dedicated to. So I do think that is the central theme here. And I do, like I said at the very end, or like you said at the end, they do reform the society. So I think this one, the title really fits. The festival, I don't know. To me, that makes sense too. The festival and the tapestry.
But we'll talk about it. But it's always like, it's not as like it's not the core of the story in the same way you would get in most stories. It's kind of like, it's like the boundary of the story rather than the core of the story. I think that's
one of the strategies that these kinds of, like, cozy, relaxed stories take, though, because it takes away that sense of, like, we gotta momentum. It takes away that stress of, like,
it's less linear. It's not necessary that, like, this follows this follows this follows this.
It takes away the need for, like, so much conflict because you're just sort of, like, wandering. So that variety helps you avoid the stress of, like, needing a climax and conflict in the same way that
you kind of just drop in, like, for little pieces, and it almost feels like a lot of the interactions, like, I think when I'm writing, I'm trying to think, or what are the most necessary interactions to get to the next spot in the story, which is more linear. And this really feels like maybe Kay O'Neill has, like, the whole story in her head with every detail, and she's just have them scenes 1 through 3,000 and just random roll a dice, and then, like, that's the scene. But they're constructed in such a way that, like, they unfold largely chronologically, and it's not as random.
It's very intentional, but this is kind of how you sometimes like, ramble at me when you're trying to,
like, right now, and I'm trying to explain an idea.
but, like, that's sort of how you think when I'm like, you just need to think by, like, talking at me for 2 hours. That's kind of how you talk. You'll just sort of, like, meander. But I think in this case, in the story, it's like a method, because it's kind of the same way in those books you were talking about, the Ball Tree books. like there's a main plot and like goal, which is like making the shop, right?
Yeah.
But on around that there are these little like meandery like subplots that sometimes aren't even really a conflict. It's like, oh, I just want to go find a really perfect gift for my friend. Like,
And it feels like in these ones especially, there's a lot of things that are in the story that could have been 20 other little subplots.
yeah,
They don't feel 100% necessary to the core plot that's suggested by the title. So that's why I'm saying the core plot suggested by the title is more of like a perimeter within which, as long as you're getting any of the stories that exist within that perimeter, you're okay. Whereas I'm used to storytelling that kind of like follows the path. But I do think that's not a negative criticism. I'm just noticing that that's kind of how this operate, and it took me a second to grab onto that because it's a very different type of structure in storytelling, and I'm used to the other thing. But I came away appreciating it because it is more accurate to life. Is that
yeah,
there's a lot of throwaway moments, but a lot of those throwaway moments are also like quote throwaway moments are very important. Like this right here of, just looking at your tea mixing, if you stop and slow down and look at that, is a moment worth taking in and savoring. Whereas from a storytelling standpoint, where you're talking about a society forming, that maybe not the most necessary.
yeah. Well, I mean, never mind that this is like magical tea that's allowing Greta to now see the shared memories of Eric and Ezekiel. Like, these are all the memories of how they met and fell in love. But
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has a function as well, but there's a lot of moments like this where it's not so plot driven, where they're just
yeah,
kind of just wandering around the world.
yeah. But I mean, like, that's the whole point
Yeah,
of this whole trilogy is about slowing down and savoring those little sweet moments in life. Like, yeah,
yeah.
like a beautiful cup of tea.
And I'm super appreciating that because it's
Yeah.
anytime I'm seeing something that's like, oh, that goes against what I thought you should do, but here it's really doing something
Yeah.
better and richer. I find it impressive. But yeah, the tea that they get from the dragons allows you to absorb or experience the past of someone else.
Like, you can recall the memories that they've shared with whoever else. Like, any memories that that tea dragon has shared with another person, or like they'll, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just delicious tea, but it's also magical. And
Tea.
you learn here about how Eric wound up in the wheelchair.
So this was my only gripe, and it's gonna seem like kind of a weird one, is that Eric, but then we find out that Eric is like disabled because he got injured. They went after this really like risky bounty because they used to be bounty hunters. He gets thwacked in the back, and then like now he's in his wheelchair. And I was just saying that I was kind of frustrated about that because it was refreshing to me that at the beginning of the story, like, Eric just showed up and he was just like we were talking about. He was just a disabled person, like, just living in the world normally. And then they had to make it this whole thing. And it's very nice and sweet, and like it almost will seem hypocritical or like a weird thing to be bothered about, because they're even like talking about the thing we're going through,
Yeah.
about like, well, you shouldn't have to, you didn't sign up for, like, I've already said that, like, you didn't sign up for me being crippled, but like, and that's true, and that's meaningful and important, and so fits the theme of this. But also, it's like, gosh, does it have to be like that? Like, it's not always like that, like, that's not the only way people end up in a wheelchair.
Yeah, I get it, but I guess because this one is showing like something similar to our situation, like it's just touching enough to me personally. So, like, yeah, because I am like in this position where I've seen you in his position, and I know that pains you. So this sequence here, where Eric they're obviously kind of having a quiet moment, and Ezekiel brings him some food, so he's kind of like serving him in a caretaker function. Just noticing it's tomato soup, which is funny because you like your tomato soup.
I do love tomatoes.
And Eric's obviously just feeling guilty and kind of unprompted says, "This isn't what you signed up for." And Ezekiel says, I signed up to fight by your side, to treat your wounds, to never abandon you. You shouldn't have to give up exploring and adventuring because of me. You love that. And then he says, it was never the adventure that I loved. And yeah, like that is 100% our situation. Is like when we got together, we were going on hikes and flipping coins to determine where we went. And it was all based on adventure. But yeah, it wasn't about that. And so yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, but you can't represent everyone too. Like, it's okay to represent.
I think it was just like it was just the melodrama of it. And I was like, man, that's always the story, right? It's always
that he got like being a hero.
The heroic injury, spinal injury. I don't know. It was just, that was all. Like I said, it's such a small gripe. It totally still fits, and I still think it leads to this beautiful discussion about what caring for someone is like.
But you're right. It could have just been
it
like...
It was just a little like, it could have been a little... Because
it could have been an infection or...
Because everything else that Kay O'Neill does is, and like in the... I don't know if it's in the tapestry of the festival, but like they deal with disability in a way that feels just way more natural and organic, and I don't know, less like they don't even talk about so like I think I like it better.
I get what you're saying. This is where it feels like it falls into like how Hollywood would do it,
or like inspo porn or something like that. I don't know.
And she normally avoids like the way Hollywood would do it.
It's much cleverer than that. It just felt odd, or like I don't know, but it's the smallest. It's the only complaint I have. Like of the whole thing, and it's not even really a complaint.
And then at the end of the story, I think you really get like the core message, and the message that I think is just such a beautiful thing, that is again focused on like the experience of learning and seeing the interior growth rather than the result, and says, I don't want blacksmithing to be forgotten. And this kind of is like what Sean says a lot about the AI stuff, is that like even if the results can be had in an easier way now, the skill, like what you gain as a person from gaining the skills is what really matters. So she says, I want to keep making objects for people to love and give them a story. Maybe one day someone will think about who gave it to them, or where they bought it, or who they shared it with, or who owned it long ago. That's a kind of magic, isn't it? And that speaks really strongly to me, because that's everything we're talking about right now, about like it's easy to see life as meaningless, but then it's really easy to also take that as a good thing, where like I just get to make the meaning. I just have to not be lazy, and that sums that up. And craftsmanship sums that up. And then that's even like no one's ever going to be able to see this on screen, but Kay O'Neill has that extra attention to craft and detail. There's this really beautiful moment here on this pot that is obviously the pot that's been crafted in the story here, where I think what happened is it got printed in process black, which is more like a 95% gray. And then I think the red, the blue, and the yellow got printed over it as well to make a darker black. Yeah. And so you get a black pot that like as black as you can get with the ink, and then there's like a 95% gray in there with the pattern. And if you've ever seen a pot that has like just a little bit of, like they glazed it differently, or they did something different with the texture to create a slight difference, it's a really crazy thing to see in print, and really beautiful and well done.
Stunning, yeah. And I'm pretty sure there's like a tea dragon in here. Even? I don't know. It's really hard to tell, but it's so cool.
Yeah,
I've never seen that in a book.
There's a tea dragon. There's a big dragon. There's a bunch of the flower designs, and it just shows like when you start to think about bookmaking as printmaking, and thinking about how you prepare the print. It's that same thing. You learn your craft thoroughly. There's other things that show up, like just knowing that you could like overprint the ink here to get a different black. Yeah. You would have to know that technical thing to even think of that effect. So it speaks to like what she's saying in the book. And then just giving this big illustration to give a sense.
It's so sweet. I love it.
And then at the end of these books, there is some extra information always. She talks here about the benefits of caretaking. Friendships formed at these meetings prove to be very strong, even if members lose touch with one another for several years or decades. When they finally meet, it is as if no time has passed. Perhaps this is because tea dragons remind one of how a decade is not very much time at all when you live for centuries. Owners of tea dragons often report that they felt themselves becoming more relaxed and peaceful after obtaining their dragon, despite the rigorousness of the care required for them. And I think like we see that not just with learning to care for you, but like caring for the dogs, or I'm sure, like as being a parent.
Or like me learning how to care for plants.
Yeah.
Which is, has been for me quite rigorous because I've always been very good at killing plants. So like, it's taken a lot of patience and failure and time and frustration. It still does. I mean, I've gotten much better, but...
Yeah.
But it made me a happier person for it. And, like, a better person. I did learn patience and persistence, which was never my strong suit. So, yeah, totally, like, caring.
It's a weird lesson to learn, because it's not one you would expect.
And just effort, and like we say, like craftsmanship, like tending your garden, like that. It seems silly or something. I don't know, maybe archaic.
Wasteful use of time.
Yeah, but I think it does enrich a person.
For themselves, like not for anyone else.
Yeah, for you.
And then in the books, there's also some like little role-playing game type of factoids about each little tea dragon. So I don't know. Do you think we should even go through the other books? I think this gives a pretty clear sense of like what the stories are.
Maybe if people want to see the other two, they can leave a comment and tell us.
Well, we can kind of just open real quick. I think there is like, we can just flip through real quick. I think the color work gets a little even spicier in the later volumes. I think there's some more moments of like these right here.
Yeah, it gets a little more adventurous or like braver sometimes.
Yeah, with the colors, and then there's these kind of. This is a really pretty one. So I think that's the one thing. The messages and the types of imagery you're getting, the types of story you're getting, are the same throughout the other volumes. You see all of our notes. We could go on and on about them. But I think you can see an artist that's still as phenomenal as the early volumes are. Someone who is still continuing to find ways to push themselves into even more beautiful areas.
Yeah, they're so freaking gorgeous. I wonder if we could get Kay to like design the inside of our house.
So, Kay O'Neill, if you find this and you want to design the inside of our house that we're going to buy in a week and a half, apparently Tori will figure out how to pay for that. Yeah. Oh, there you go. There's an example of how the colors get more rich.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the palettes get a little more varied and like richer, deeper.
Yeah, it's not all the earth tones all the way through.
Which I really like the earth tones of the first one a lot, but this really adds some like flavor. Yeah, and just like, what can you even say? Beauty
to it. So anyways, Kay O'Neill is an amazing artist. Obviously, we intended to do this all in one video, and we enjoy this work so much, we've had to just decide to not even get through all of it. But do yourself a favor, go out and get yourself at least one Kay O'Neill book, even if you're not into like kids book or kids lit. I think if you're just a fan of good art, great illustration, great storytelling, beautiful colors, you'd really be, doing yourself a disservice to not get yourself some Kay O'Neill work, because look at that. That is stunning.
And look at the grumpy Kay O'Neill.
Centralia is an awesome, gorgeous comic by rising Dutch star Neil Van de Peet. This is his first work. It's a really great sci-fi story. There's a world in the future where the sun has gotten so hot that people can't be on the ground, so they have to run around. There's a lot of conceits that go with that. You know, what is the world that looks like? And I think you can see by the art that Sean's description of this book as like a Moebius for young adults, a YA Moebius, is a really great description of this really gorgeous and like wild, wacky, fun book.